Hey, if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. We appreciate the likes and subscriptions. Anyway, today we got a 01 F-150 and we're going to be doing the upper control arms and lower ball joints. This is a four-wheel drive model with torsion bar front suspension. So we're going to do upper control arms. We're going to press out the lower ball joints, service those. We're also going to, while we're in there, replace brake rotors and pads, and we're replacing the sway bar in-link on both sides. The left front here has a broken sway bar in-link. We're going to replace that while we're in there. I'm just going to show you the left side, and of course that's pretty much a mirror image of the right, although the upper control arm is a different part number. Should be straightforward. So just a general disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes, good overview of what you're going to be looking at if you're going to attempt this job. Definitely recommend that you only do safety related steering and suspension and braking repairs if you're qualified to do so, and you sure want to consult your manufacturer repair information so that you use proper techniques for servicing these components, proper torque when reinstalling them, and that it's done right and it's safe. So anyway, we're going to get going here. I have the vehicle lifted on a 4-post rack, and the front suspension is supported underneath the front lower control arms, and I'm going to remove the tire and we're going to get going on this thing. Thanks again for coming by. Now I'm going to remove the front outer axle shaft retaining cotter pin and retainer. Now I'm going to remove the disc brake caliper and support it by first removing the caliper slide bolts and then supporting the brake caliper by using a wire and suspending it from the frame area so that it doesn't pull on the flexible brake hose and cause damage. Then I'm going to remove the inner caliper mount by removing the 2 bolts that attach it to the knuckle. Now I'm going to remove the disc brake rotor. Now I remove the axle shaft retaining nut and also the outer tie rod end retaining nut. Now I remove the outer tie rod end from the steering knuckle by pounding on the face of the steering knuckle at the tie rod end stud. Before I disconnect the knuckle from the ball joints, I drive the axle shaft back in to allow for removal. In this case, the axle shaft is pretty much stuck in the hub and it required a lot of force to drive it back out. Occasionally you'll run into an axle shaft that's absolutely frozen into the hub. In cases where the axle shaft is completely frozen into the hub and you cannot remove the hub from the axle shaft, you can remove the inner axle shaft retaining bolts and remove it as an assembly. It requires a little bit of finagling to get the proper angle to get it removed from the lower ball joint, but it can be done. Now I'm going to remove the cotter pins and the upper and lower ball joint stud retaining nuts. I'll also disconnect the wheel speed sensor wiring harness at this time and set it aside to allow for removal of the knuckle assembly. After the upper and lower ball joint retaining nuts have been removed, remove the knuckle assembly by again striking the face of the knuckle at the ball joint stud areas until the studs become dislodged. After removing the knuckle assembly, remove the outer snap ring from the lower ball joint. Now remove the lower ball joint by either using a ball joint press, or in this case, I'm going to use a hammer, but being careful not to hit the outside face of the ball joint so that it won't go through the recessed area at the lower control arm. Now remove the upper control arm retaining bolts, but also take note of the position and angle of the upper control arm, as this is necessary for reinstallation. Now reinstall the replacement upper control arm assembly. Now would be a great time to replace the upper control arm bolts with the cam style bolts necessary to accommodate alignment adjustments. However, I'm simply going to reinstall the original bolts and torque them, but being careful to locate them precisely where the old bolts were positioned. That way the alignment angles should be preserved and possibly no adjustment will be required. However, after this service, it's required that a front end alignment be done. Now, using a ball joint press, install the replacement lower ball joint. Install the replacement snap ring and install the grease zerk by orienting the grease zerk towards the rear of the vehicle. I'm going to take this opportunity while it's accessible to remove the broken sway bar end-link from the vehicle. I'm going to use a grinder with a cutting disc attachment, and you could also use a sawzall or a hacksaw to remove a broken sway bar end-link from the vehicle. Now I'm going to reinstall the steering knuckle. Now I will install and torque the upper and lower ball joint retaining nuts. Torque to the lower end of the torque specifications and then tighten to align the cotter pin hole. Never back off the nut to align the cotter pin hole. Always tighten it. I'm going to temporarily install and lightly tighten the axle nut, and now I'm going to take this opportunity to install the replacement sway bar end link. Now I'm going to install the replacement brake rotor. Now I'm going to prepare and install the brake caliper mounting bracket. I'm going to apply a small amount of blue Loctite on the caliper mounting bracket bolts, then install the mounting bracket and torque properly. Now I'm going to install the replacement brake pads into the caliper mounting bracket. Now I'm going to compress the caliper pistons. Now I'm going to apply a small amount of blue Loctite to the caliper slide bolts and install the torque properly. Now route and reconnect the ABS wheel speed sensor wiring. Now reinstall the outer tie rod end into the steering knuckle, torque the nut properly, and install your cotter pin. Apply a couple pumps of grease into both grease zerks. Now reinstall the wheels, lower the vehicle, and torque the lug nuts as well as the axle nuts to specification. Driving the vehicle, be sure to pump the brake pedal until the pedal becomes firm in order to extend the caliper pistons and avoid a falling brake pedal should you put it in reverse and back away without pumping it up first. All right, hey, we've about got this thing wrapped up, and I'm just going to lower it down and perform a four-wheel alignment on it before I turn it back over to the customer and get them back safely on the road. Hey, I appreciate you watching today, and I want to wish you good luck with your repairs. Have a good one.